Welcome to episode 28 of the Free Your Mind podcast. Today I want to talk about something that's quite hard to talk about. And depending on where you're at, right? For some people, trying to find who they are is a really big question. For other people, it might be a question they've not really thought about, although on some level are probably searching for it. So for some people, it literally is, who am I? Who am I? And that can be quite confusing for them because they may have a lot of my clients are quite like, and maybe all humans are like this on some level, a bit like chameleons, right? They'll be different with this group of friends, different with this old group of friends from school, or but different work or in their job, and different here and different there, and they will mould and change depending on who they're with. On some people, depending on, I guess, their own kind of confidence or comfort within themselves, will even go along with things that they don't necessarily agree with, but they go with the crowd in some ways. Like, for example, I used to do that. I'd probably just have conversations that I actually find a bit shit or I didn't really agree with, but you just kind of go along with it. Or in the past, I may not have a really trivial example. I don't really drink much. I'm not really a huge fan. If I get drunk, if it's something that seems worth it to me, like I love music, back in the day being a raver and whatever, if I was to go and listen to some good music, would I get drunk? Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that seems like worthwhile. But going to the pub, talking just about superficial bullshit, having a hangover for absolutely no reason at all, sat next to some old granddads, in a fag-smelling kind of pub. It sounds like shit to me, honestly. But then that depends on the company. It depends who's there. So, that's where it comes in. Because why does it depend on who's there? Well, it depends on what conversation I'm having. But anyway, in the past, people would say, you should go out, you should come out more often. Because people liked when I was out. And I'm like, yeah. And I'd use the kids as an excuse as to why I wasn't out. Because I thought I'd be negatively judged for saying, I actually don't really like going out that much. I'm not really, I'd prefer to... Or I didn't want to say, look, I'd love to come out, but you will bore me. Which wouldn't always be the truth, honestly. But I'm just trying to throw examples out there, right? Anyway, I'm losing track of this. But so for some people, that's the question. Like, who am I? And that may tie into the work they do. What is it that's important to them? What do I value? Who am I? Why do I this? Why do I that? And they can be really kind of burning questions, a search. If you're someone that's into personal development, you've probably entertained that question, and you can do all these values worksheets, and there's all sorts of, I remember, was it with, can't remember the guy's name, it was like this fucking massive long writing assignment about who I am, and my preferences and what I like and dislike, and in this situation I tend to be this and that. And then you've got all these personality profiles, DISC and Myers-Briggs, and hundreds of them, the one with all the different colours. But even with that, I'd fill in these tests, and I'd get a different answer depending on what mood I was in. If I filled it in the morning, I would 100% get a different answer to if I filled it in the evening. Like, my personality type would somehow change, right? And some of these are scarily accurate. Like, you'd be like, oh my God, that's me, and that's me, and that's me. But a bit like horoscopes. I'm not necessarily into horoscopes, I've got to be honest. Now, I'm always open to there being stuff I don't understand. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I really benefit from it. Or maybe it's a load of bullshit. I don't know. But at this moment in time, of the moment of this being recorded, I'm not really into it. But I could see how you read it and you would apply it to yourself. That's kind of how that works. That's supposedly how psychics work. Although, again, I'm open, as much as a bit skeptical. I'm kind of open to the idea that maybe there's something there. There's certainly some mysterious kind of forces at work in this universe, right? There's fucking God knows what beyond our galaxy. I'm very open to the idea that the possibilities, there's things I don't understand, there's many things I don't know. So, but at this current moment in time, it's the same kind of thing. I think if I I saw a psychic once, and he said, you really wanted to travel. And I said, no. And he was like, no, you didn't really want to travel. Okay, so you just give me two opposite statements. But, if he was to say, you really grew up wanting to be successful, how many people go, yeah, that's me? Probably most, I imagine. And if they didn't, they'd probably just forget about that part of the conversation, right? So there's definitely the reticular activating system in our brain. It looks for what we think is important. We tend to see what we think we already know. That's why you see people so biased in their arguments, because they only see the evidence that supports what they think they already know. They're not open-minded, etc. Where was I going with this? Somewhere. I was going somewhere. Oh yeah, going back to the personality profiles and stuff. It's like you can fill it in and go, oh, this is me. This is me. And it's like, yeah. But I used to kind of, be, I don't know what the word is. I was going to say a deeper thinker than that, where I'd look and think, this is scarily accurate. But I'd also then think, would this apply to this person, that person? And I would do it again and I'd get something different. And that sounds like me. And I'd do it again and get something different. Well, that kind of sounds like me and that doesn't. And you delete the parts that don't resonate and you would hold on to the parts that did. And I remember I got a sales job and I had to do one of these assessments before. And I knew what they would want it to come out as. So I answered all the questions based on what I thought they wanted to hear, not based on who I actually was. So even then it would be like, who the fuck am I? Am I an INFJ? Am I a ENTP or whatever these different, forget all the different personality types from Myers-Briggs. Am I this and that and this and that? And I could be different things. Am I an extrovert or an introvert? I'm different. Depends where I am. See me with my clients, I'm an extrovert, massive extrovert. See me with, close friends, and I'm a massive extrovert. See me on a night out when I've had a few beers, and I'm the fucking biggest extrovert you can find, right? But then at the same time, I'd be a massive introvert. I'd kind of always, my default setting is I don't want to go out. I don't want to be where people are. I don't like people around me. It's too loud. I want everyone to fuck off. I want to sit on my own. Sitting in silence on my own is kind of where I recharge. Until I've had too much of that, and I'm like, right, I'd like to see some people now. It would change. Oh, but now there's an ambivert. Oh, that's convenient. So now if you're an introvert and an extrovert, you're an ambivert. So what the fuck, right? How does that make sense? It's kind of like, and that is the logical brain trying to come up with, we're looking for explanations. We're looking for boxes. We're looking to explain things. Everything has to have a name. We can't just have something that is nothing. It's like everything has to have a name. This is a tree. This is a car. We have to put it into boxes. What the fuck is that? Well, it's got 4 wheels. It drives. Well, it must be a car then. Okay, cool. It's got 3 wheels. It's a trike. It's got 2 wheels. It's a bike. We have to have these names for things, right? And I will get to a good point at some stage. But it's just worth noticing. So for some people like me, I'd never really know who I was. Because I was super confident. Super confident. When it came to women, when I was younger, everyone would say, oh my God, you're so confident. I don't know how you do that. When it came to football, super confident. People would, that's what I believe. I actually made up for my lack of skill with hard work, determination and confidence. I scored some outrageous goals. And it's not because I've got the most skill. It's just because I wasn't really afraid to take a shot. And if it went wide and everyone was like, what the fuck? I'd be like, oh, well, I didn't care too much. Even though I did care, but no one knew I cared. And I would just do it again because I cared more about having a shot than I did people's opinions, even though their opinions bothered me. So already there's a paradox. Do I care or don't I care? When I'd go up to... Jenna, my wife, was a third year at uni. I was first year. And going up to her, talking to her, flirting with her, I would have come across very confident, very comfortable. I've always been able to talk about anything. I've always said things that are a bit shocking to people, which lends itself to this business, right? This job, this coaching, because I can ask questions that people don't usually get asked. I can ask questions that no one else around them asks. When people are surrounded by yes men, I can be the no man, not just to be a dick, but because it doesn't feel uncomfortable to me to ask these questions. So people have always been comfortable around me. So externally, you would see this confident person, and I will get to you in a second rather than just talk about myself, but myself is an easy example because I know myself, right? And you can relate to parts of this. But people didn't know that whilst I was having banter and laughing and talking to women or whatever I was doing, playing football or standing at the front of, the lecture hall, or people didn't know that inwardly I was shitting myself. If I'd actually held my hand out in front of me, you would have seen it shaking. But no one knew that because I didn't go, look, I'm shaking. I just didn't bring attention to that. And I didn't allow that to stop me. It was like, feel the fear and do it anyway. It was like, yes, I'm scared, but who cares? Or maybe it was like, yes, I'm scared, but I care more about having the conversation than I do sitting here and being afraid. I don't know what it was, right? So then it's like, am I confident? Am I not? And this is really fascinating because if I was to take a test about social anxiety, I have social anxiety in quotes. If you're watching on the video, you'll see air quotes, like rabbit ears as I do the quotes. I have social anxiety. But if you watch me, do I have social anxiety? But I feel the thoughts, I feel the emotions. But you either allow them to mean something and change your behaviour, or you don't. So do I have social anxiety or do I not? Who fucking knows? If I do an assessment on ADHD, I have ADHD, but then sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. And then even that's a rabbit hole, right? If I was ever to have gone to the doctors, 100% would have been diagnosed with probably anxiety, depression and bipolar. And that would have been my experience at times. It still can be sometimes. It still can seem that way. Sometimes I can still, on a bad day feel like I really am fucked. I just know enough now to not, for that not to become anything, or it not to grow into anything, but that's, a different conversation. And this is the thing, right? If you do these assessments, if you're a bit of a chameleon, which actually can lend itself really well, in terms of emotional intelligence, in terms of people skills, etc. But that used to leave me with these kind of questions. 1 minute I'd think I was confident, and then I would think I wouldn't. Then I'd think I wasn't, sorry. And you could allow that to change the way you do things. Right, I can't do this because I'm not confident, or I can't do this because I have anxiety. Though the sentences like that make me want to slap people. Oh, my anxiety. Fuck your anxiety. Everyone has anxiety. But again, I say that with love, although it doesn't sound like it, because that's just a lack of understanding. Every human has anxiety. It's an emotion that we all feel, right? Every human feels fear, anxiety, stress, depression, whatever else, right? These are all just words to point to feelings. I didn't know I had anxiety. A lot of my clients don't, because they wouldn't say, I'm anxious or I have anxiety. They would say, yeah, it was a really busy day, and then there was this point where I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. My heart was racing, and my vision went funny. And someone else might call that a panic attack. Someone else might call that anxiety. Oh, this nervous kind of jittery feeling in my stomach, and someone else might call that anxiety, but they just don't. So we're going back to the kind of thought-created concepts. And now moving on, so you got kind of some people that are searching for themselves, and they think that when they find themselves, then they can be happy, find love, do the thing they want to do, make an impact in the world, write a book, become a coach, grow their business, get married, whatever they think that finding themselves is going to allow them to do. Good luck finding yourself, by the way. We'll come on to that. But just a little hint, finding yourself is a bit like peeling back the layers of an onion. If you keep pulling back the layers of an onion, you don't find like a diamond in the middle, like hallelujah with this diamond. You actually find nothing. You keep peeling the layers back until there's no onion left, and then you're like, oh. We'll get onto that. But on the other side of that, you've got people that haven't really thought about who they are. They think they know who they are, and the thoughts they have around who they think they are remain consistent in their mind until their wife leaves them, has an affair, they go through divorce, they have an affair, they lose their business, they lose their house, they when something shakes or takes away part of their identity, they suddenly feel emotions and thoughts and see parts of their personality they've never seen before, and then that can sometimes cause them to question themselves. They lose themselves, or they wonder what the fuck is happening. They wonder, so that can happen, and that can cause people to think, what the fuck? Or some people can cling so desperately onto their identity, what they think is their identity, who they think they are, that limits them. Because someone like me doesn't do this, or I am this kind of person, and they will spend their life protecting that, whether they know that or not, right? So to take this a little bit deeper, and this is where it gets interesting, potentially confusing, or hopefully not. If I do a good job, it won't be confusing. But if you try and understand this from a logical perspective, it probably won't make a whole ton of sense. But if you listen to the feeling, if there's a part of you that listens and settles down and kind of feels like you know what I'm talking about, that usually means something, right? So the way it's come to look for me now is, it's like, I watched a video a few years back now, probably. And it said the problem with self-development is the self that you're trying to develop doesn't exist. Now, years ago, that wouldn't have made a whole ton of sense to me, a whole lot of sense to me. But it did, and it does. And the only way I'm going to try and point to this now is if we was to create almost two versions of ourselves, right? You've got the ego, as some people would call it, as I tend to call it. Now, the ego for me is this thought construct, this thought-created self. And within that ego is this identity, this who we think we are, and we tend to be consistent with who we think we are. So if we think we are confident, we tend to do things that would prove ourselves right. If we think we have anxiety, we will tend to act in accordance with that. If we think we can't do something because of whatever, we will tend to, really fucking useful notification telling me my screen time. If we tend to think, even something like that, right? If I'm someone that was a perfectionist, and I used to be, and would now be having thoughts that that's fucked up my podcast, I'd have to turn this off and start again. And I'd be angry, and I wouldn't start again. I'd turn the whole thing off, and I'd be fucking pissed off, and the world pisses me off because nothing ever goes right. And I actually would have come from that place, probably a long time ago now, but I can see it. I can still almost remember it. So who we think we are resides in this egoic part of us, but that egoic thought created part of ourselves. Now, when I say thought, that can be patterns, that can be habits, that can be our tendencies. We tend to do things a certain way, our automatic thoughts or automatic behaviors. I'm someone that would automatically tend to lean towards anger more than something else. I would lean towards more towards anger. Things make me snappy. When I get overwhelmed, it turns to frustration. When things don't go right, I would turn to... And when I say anger, I mean just my tone, my snappiness. I might throw things. Back in the day, I might punch things, never people. That might come out in different ways. I'd smash my phone, I'd throw something at the wall, I'd punch something, I'd scream, whatever it was, right? So there are tendencies. But these all reside within this kind of thought-created self, this thought-created ego. It's thinking itself into existence, but without us necessarily knowing. It's like the physicist, I think David Bohm, I don't know how you pronounce it, I should look that up, says that thought creates the world, then says, I didn't do it. Our identities sort of create themselves through conditioning and school and parents, and but then they say, I didn't do it. Our identities are creating themselves and then saying, I didn't do it. And if someone's not open-minded, if someone's not open to change, they will be people that continue to have the same addictions, same problems, same personality traits, and they refuse to change. Maybe because they don't think they can. And therefore their ego is protecting itself, and part of that ego is saying we can't change. People never change. What an absolute bollocks sentence that is. It's the biggest load of horse shit. People do change if they want to change. And if they believe they can, right? And sometimes you don't even need to believe you can. It's just the openness that is possible and looking in the direction. There are many times I thought things within myself wouldn't change, but I was like, well, I'm open to being wrong, and then they change. So our sense of self is derived from this ego, this egoic self that tells us stories that remain consistent until they change. Now, I've obviously done this for long enough to know that things change, people change. Once, even looking in this direction, having this conversation today can open up new things. You know, once you go from, I have anger issues, that's an identification with that. All the while I'm telling myself I have anger issues, I've made that part of my personality like that's something within me. That is me. I have anger issues. I have anxiety. I am someone who doesn't. They're all thoughts masquerading as identity. They're all statements that we're identified with. And from what I've seen, every time we identify with our thinking, that's where we get lost. That's where life feels shitter. That's where we lose that sense of peace and power. That's where we tend to restrict ourselves, because we've created an identity. We've created a story about ourselves or the world that we identify as, and we think that's who we are. And I know this is a deeper conversation, but what if that isn't who we are? What if who we are is just as fluid as our thoughts, just as changing as our thoughts, just as changing as the weather in some ways, if we allowed it to be? Now, that might point to, if you're someone that identified with the first part, the kind of chameleon aspect where your personality can change and you come out as different depending on... Well, that points to that, right? Why is that? How can we be confident and not confident all at once? How can we be someone that is confident in this but not in that, or sometimes feels positive, sometimes feel negative, sometimes is an extrovert, sometimes is an introvert, sometimes is really positive and a leader and full of energy, and sometimes is kind of depressed and dark and wants to lay in bed? How can we be all of those things all at once? Isn't that paradoxical in itself? But that kind of points to the fact that our identity is more transient than we like to see sometimes, because the egoic mind doesn't like this. The thought-created mind, logical mind, cannot grasp that the very sense of self is something that doesn't exist, because we're looking for consistency. We're looking for... The brain likes certainty. It likes to know. It likes to explain things. It likes to... I'm someone that always likes to know how things work, and I need to know why. Why am I doing this? Why are you asking me to do that? Why did the film end this way? Why did they put that bit in there? And that's the logical brain in this kind of overdrive, and it wants to know, who am I? Who am I? What do I do? What do I do in this situation? And the brain takes a lot of comfort from that. There's certain... I used to coach that way, by the way, and there are certain coaching methodologies that are all very much focused on this thought-created self. That's what values and stuff are. It's the brain's way of trying to know, what does James do in this situation? Even the question, if I was to face that situation again, what would I do differently? It's because you're trying to feed your egoic mind a new alternative, a new pattern, so it knows, right, James is confident. Okay, how does James behave? He does this. Cool. Oh, that went wrong and I felt like this. Well, what would I do differently next time? This. And the brain goes, okay, cool. So now we do this. It's trying to follow these patterns and these programs of who I am and what I do and how I behave and what I say and what I don't say. And we've been conditioned our whole life. You don't talk about shit at the dinner table. You raise your hand if you need a piss. You ask permission if you... whatever. Don't stand out too much. Don't have a big green Mohican. Don't, your... whatever it is, right? We have all of this overactive egoic mind that is desperately trying to cling on to consistency and the known aspects of this personality. But yet you get a sense that it's not as true as we like to think it is, because if it was really that true, why is it so difficult to explain who we are? Like, who are you? That's my question to you. What would you say? Some people go, I'm a dad, and I'm a... Okay, they're roles that you play, but who are you? Oh, I'm a nice guy. I'm considerate, and okay, they are... Firstly, they're kind of traits or their ways you tend to show up, but you're still not answering the question of who are you. Plus, if I was to say I'm funny, I'm confident. Well, no, I'm not always funny. I'm not always confident. So am I funny or am I not? Am I confident or am I not? I'm someone that's full of wisdom and likes to do podcasts. That's not always true. Sometimes there's not an ounce of wisdom in me. And you ask me for, I don't know, some advice, and I say, I don't fucking know, leave me alone, I want to sit here and sulk, you know? So even that's not true. So we tend to explain our job, or where we live, or our kids, or our roles. I'm a business owner, I'm a doctor, that's what you do, but that's not who you are. And that leads on to the next part of this conversation, where that's part of the egoic identity as well. It tries to extend its sense of self through things, money, status, titles, houses, cars, areas you live in, sports, hobbies. Then it's like, well, I am a CEO of whatever it is I do, because then that becomes an extension of our identity. We use these things to try and define ourselves. I surf, or I don't surf. I'd like to. Don't live near the sea. But, they become parts of our identity. The cars we drive. Why do we spend so much money on cars and watches and clothes? Like, I'm wearing this, right? And to be fair, I do like gym gear because it's comfortable. I spend most of my life in it and go to the gym in it, etc. But why is this not Primark? Or why is it not... And it's like, just because you've got... Oh, this is mirrored. Just because you've got this little badge here, that represents something. It's like you extend your identity with a brand. Gymshark. I wear Gymshark. It's because I really like the guy that founded it. I love how he grew the business. I love that he had the intelligence to realise I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here. So he hired older people that had more experience in business so that they could take over the growth of the business whilst he focused on the parts he enjoyed. I think to have the wisdom and the knowledge to do that at his age is fucking genius. To drop his own ego and, be able to say, I don't know what I'm doing here, let's get people to do. So every time I put that Gymshark vest on, it's not I'm trying to look cool. Firstly, I'm wearing the vest because I hate being hot, and I can work harder when I'm not hot. Secondly, actually, the armpits don't smell of BO because there aren't no armpits compared to wearing a t-shirt, which means I don't have to wash it. I wear the same vest for, truthfully, about 2 weeks because it doesn't smell, which is fucking perfect. Less washing. But secondly, because it represents something that I obviously value: business growth, intelligence, that his passion turning into this business. So you start to see my ego is using this as an extension of itself. I wear barefoot trainers. Why? Well, firstly, for foot function. Secondly, that represents a part of my made up self, like this caveman kind of functional human that focuses on health and movement and kind of goes against the grain when everyone's wearing shoes and trainers that fuck up your feet, ruin your posture, impact the angles of your hips and your back. There's me wearing these ugly as shit barefoot trainers because they represent something to me, right? So you get the idea. Why do I drive the car I drive rather than a Dacia Sandero? Well, because when I bought that car, it seemed like success and luxury was an extension of myself. This is what I valued. I'm successful, don't you know? Look at my car and whatever else, right? You get the point, I'm sure. So the ego looks to, even I look at my Mac, and it's like, even that has a bit of Apple has a bit of a following to it. There are certain people like me that only ever have Apple. But it costs twice as much. It's like, I don't fucking care. It does its job. It looks nice, and I like it. you tend to have Android users and you have iPhone users. They've recently did a study, and iPhone users is supposedly a less attractive trait. Essentially, people that are looking for a partner or a mate, whatever. Or whatever they're looking for, someone that uses Android is less attractive. But I can see that, right? I can see that because Android represents something. It represents, and I'm not saying it's unattractive or attractive because that's just an opinion. But again, we use even our phone as an extension of who we think we are, as an extension of our. But that's why when we lose it, it's so painful. When we lose, I've got a client that was successful, had a business, married, etc. He lost it all, a bit like I did. And he really fucking struggled. Really struggled. This is before he was a client of mine. Because he'd lost essentially everything, but in some ways he'd lost himself or who he thought his self was. Because I am a business owner. I am a millionaire. I am married with however many kids, and I this and that, and I have this big house, and suddenly you lose all of that, and it's like, well, who the fuck am I now? But they were never who he really was. But you can see how we shape our world, our clothes, our body. People that... The simple truth is, right, if you don't look like me, that's not good or bad. You can make it good or bad, that's your thoughts. You just don't value health as much as I do. That's the simple thing, right? I've got clients that are super successful, way more than me, but they just don't seem to ever get in shape. It's because health isn't their number one priority. That's the truth of it. Money comes first. And when you dive into that, you realise that for them, money was the thing that would solve all of their problems. And then obviously some people think if you get a six-pack, you'll attract women. But this person realised if you have money, you attract women. So I can do that. And anyway, that's just a demonstration of who we think we are, or our kind of thought-created, ego-created sense of values. Anyway, I feel like I'm spending some time on this. And to be fair, this conversation could be a very long one, and it probably will be. We're already at half hour, so I will start to wrap this up. But at the same time, I don't want to skim over this just because of time. So maybe this is a podcast you pause and come back to. I don't know, but... So if I'm saying all of this stuff is a sense of ego, a sense of self, you may be thinking, well, yeah, and this conversation can shake the snow globe a little bit, by the way. It can shake you up a bit. You can argue against it. Yeah, but this is fine. And, well, if I didn't have this, then I wouldn't be successful. And if I didn't care, then I'd be a homeless man or a hippie or, let's put that to one side for now, because I get those thoughts come up and they will potentially be answered over time. But it comes back to the question of who are we? And if you try and understand this too much, trust me, if you think you know, you don't. If you think you understand it, you don't. But if you can get a sense of it, it's a bit like... It's kind of a bit like a mirage in a desert. It's like you can see it, you can make it out, it's there, but it's also not there. And the closer you get to it, it disappears, and then it's over there, and you're like, It is a bit like that. It's because the part of us that's trying to understand it is the logical brain, but there's a lot to life that is not logical. It doesn't make any sense. There's so many things in life that are miraculous that, I don't fully understand fucking gravity. I know that if I jump out the window, I fall to the floor. If I throw things, they drop. But do we really understand it? It's an invisible force that's pulling me towards the floor. How? How is it pulling me? It's not grabbing me. It's like magnetic, but I'm not a metal, or I'm not a magnet. But then even magnets, it's like we know that they stick, but how the fuck do they do that? Now, we can obviously, the logical brain wants to understand electrons, protons, neutrons, I don't know, but there are parts to being human that we do better when we just get a sense of, and we just get comfortable with the unknown. We say, I don't know, but it looks like this. I don't know, but it feels like this. I don't know, but I get a sense. You have to... again, the egoic brain wants certainty. It wants to know I've got this much money and this much coming in, and every time I do this, this happens. And it wants this sense of certainty. Although, hint, if you have too much certainty, it becomes boring. You become bored of life, and you Some people like to then fuck shit up. They don't know they've got that pattern. When things are going really well, they like to create chaos and fuck things up so they can kind of fix it again. And that can be a pattern for too much certainty becomes boring, and then they want to do something. They want to go on a session. They want to do something possibly destructive. They want to kind of have some chaos for a bit. So that's worth noticing. But the unknown is such a beautiful thing once you become comfortable with it. But so who we are is who we think we are. There's a quote here. You're not what you think you are, but what you think you are. I'll repeat that and give you some time to kind of process that. You're not what you think you are, but what you think you are. I'm smiling like an idiot if you was to see me on camera, which you might be. Because it's just a fascinating thought. And again, we don't need to do anything with this conversation. Just sit with it, just ponder it, just play with it, just get playful and curious, right? So who the fuck are we? Now, for some people, this very sentence can change their world. For you, this might be kind of basic, although you might find that you need reminding of the basics. I know I certainly do, and I've been doing this for, basically a third of my life. And I still need to remind myself or be reminded of the basics because we seemingly seem to forget somehow. But some people identify with their thinking, and a really big shift in them is when they start to see their thinking. They go from the thoughts happening and then afterwards they're like, oh shit, what happened? They then start seeing them in real time. They start noticing the thoughts as they arise. They start noticing the thoughts as they appear. And to them, that's like quite big because rather than get sucked into the thoughts, you react and then afterwards you're like, oh shit, why did I do that? You've got to apologise, you've got to unfuck things up. You can see it as it's happening. And sometimes you might still get caught in it, but then you go, oh my God, I saw as it was happening. And then you find yourself, assuming you stay in a conversation like this, have some form of coaching or whatever it is that works for you, you start to see the thoughts arise. Sometimes you can feel the emotion, but you don't take the bait. You don't buy it. And then your reaction's different. And you start to see this distance between the thoughts, and they start to become like clouds in the sky. And at that point, the question becomes, well, if you are not your thoughts, who are you? Who is the person that's watching the thoughts? If you are not who you think you are, and you're sat here thinking, who am I? Who is the person that is sat watching the thoughts of who am I? Who is that person? What is that part of you that's even holding the space for the conversation of who am I? As you then think, well, I'm this, or I'm that, or I'm... That space before the chatter, that space before the thought. It's like if these thoughts are coming onto the screen, like a cinema or whatever, are we the space? Are we the blank screen before the thoughts enter? Are we the blank slate before we write, this is how I act and this is who I am? Are we the blank slate before the conditioning of school and society and media and social media and parents and, and how, we're continually almost being reinvented, right? I think every 10 years, every cell in our body is renewed, which confuses the fuck out of me. Because how does it not renew itself as something else? How do I not go from being a man to a lizard or a man to a woman? Who knows? But but that's true for our thinking and our identity. But the only thing is we just keep consistently thinking the same thoughts. If you keep consistently thinking the same thoughts, you will continue to consistently be the same person. But if every time a thought changes, you have an insight, you listen to a podcast like this and it alters your trajectory in 1 degree, you become someone different. You think new thoughts. You change over time. And if you look at yourself now compared to 10 years ago, you're probably a very different person. How? How's that happened? Anyway, getting back to the point. So what if we are consciousness? What if that part of us that knows we're alive, that dogs and cats seemingly don't have? It doesn't seem like they look at themselves in the mirror and ponder life or think about next year or how far they've come or whatever. if we are consciousness, and you can point to this in different ways, right? If you close your eyes for a second, kind of put your hands out in front of you, and I'm doing this as well, by the way, so this might look weird, but so close your eyes, put your hands out in front of you. Hopefully you're not driving or something. It might not work as well, and you might die. Are your hands still there? I'm assuming your answer is yes. If your hands are still there, how do you know? What part of you knows your hands are still there? How did you know they were still there? How did you know they weren't gone? Like, and depending on, again, everyone can have a different experience of this, but usually the answer is, well, I can kind of feel them. Well, feel what? We can feel this kind of energy, this life force, this tingling or this warmth or this. But again, it points to who is the person that's feeling? What is that part of us that knows we're alive? That consciousness, as I said, right? The space that emotions arise into. The space that allows thoughts to come in. What if that's what we are? What if that's who we are? And it can't be defined. It can't be pointed at. It can't be described. It's like, those statements, I am confident. Well, some people say, you take it back to I am. But what's before the I am? Now, I don't know if you're following this or not. I hope you are. What's before I am? Silence, space. We focus on the form of words. We focus on the form of what I'm saying, the inflections, the tonality, but there's gaps in between the words. What if we are the gaps between our thinking? What if we are the space before the thoughts of who am I? When we're not thinking about who we are, like that consciousness, just very fucking interesting. Now, why am I sharing this? Why am I spending, where are we now, 42 minutes on this? Why am I taking so much time to have this conversation with you? Because when we start to see the difference between thought and identification with thought, when we start to see the difference between that and this space within, this silence, this depth, this aliveness, this consciousness, life looks very different. When we find that stillness within ourselves, that peacefulness within ourselves, that presence, which is what a lot of people seem to be looking for but don't necessarily know what the fuck that means. There's this sense of peacefulness, this aliveness, this peaceful kind of power. And it doesn't mean we're not still affected by emotions. It doesn't mean we're not still, unhappy when it rains and happy when it's sunny, or, happy when things go right or unhappy when they don't. It's just they don't seem to impact us on the same depth. They become ripples on the surface of the ocean rather than this massive storm. And I know I've spoken about this before, but rather than us be on the top of the sea in these fighting the waves, trying to survive because we are desperately clinging on to life, you start to notice that you are the depth of the ocean. There's this stillness within you that remains unchanged. It's this kind of deeper sense of calmness and peacefulness. And this is the ultimate goal with any of my coaching, by the way, or any of these conversations, is to help people to see that, because then life becomes ripples on the surface. Stress still happens, drama still happens, shit still hits the fan, things go right, things go wrong. But rather than, one of my clients kind of explained this as, rather than this massive roller coaster, a few of them have said this actually, rather than this massive roller coaster of ups and downs, it becomes more level. You still have the ups, you still have the downs, but they don't feel as extreme, because there's this sense of calmness, peacefulness, and there's a feeling of, you just don't give as much of a shit. But it doesn't mean you don't give a shit as in, I don't fucking give a shit. It's like I don't give a shit, but let's do this, or let's do that, or Oh, well, that went wrong. Let's try this. Rather than, oh, fuck, everything's gone wrong. Oh, my life's over. What are we going to do? Panic, stressed, having a heart attack, laying awake all night. You're kind of like, you still feel the sense of, okay, that's gone wrong. But you don't get drawn into it on quite the same level because you never lose that sense of grounding. People call it grounding. People call it stillness. People call it that space within. There are so many words for it, right? Now, you could be listening to this knowing, saying, I know that fucking feeling. You could be listening to this saying, I'm now feeling that feeling after this conversation. Thanks, James. You've reminded me of what I knew already. You've pointed me in the direction of something. You might be feeling it for the first time in this conversation where you stop and think, yeah, I do feel calmer. My stresses don't feel as stressful, even though nothing's changed. And that might give you a sense of, wow, maybe there's truth in this. Or maybe this doesn't make sense. I don't know what the answer is for you. And there's no right or wrong. It can be any of those things. It depends on your willingness to look in this direction, your consciousness in this moment. I think once you've felt it, it's quite easy to find your way home. It's a bit like when you go back to a town that you have visited before. It's easier to navigate because you've been there before. If you've grown up somewhere, when you go back, it feels like home. It feels like you know everything. Well, that's similar with this. The more you feel this feeling, if you feel it for the first time, it's unfamiliar and you might mistake it for something else. You might skim over it. You might pass through. If you've been there for any length of time, it feels familiar. It's like returning home to a place that you had forgotten, but yet it's like a home that you'd forgotten. I imagine if you lost your memory and went back to, a childhood house, there'd be a part of you that feels familiar with it. It can feel like that. And I know this sounds weird. For other people, you know this feeling. And it's like, oh, fuck. And we tend to lose touch of that depth, lose touch of that stillness so often. And it just takes a little reminder sometimes to bring us back. Just a little reminder because the thought storms on the surface are so real, so convincing, so powerful sometimes that of course we get caught in it. And that's okay. That doesn't matter. Like, take it from me, just trust me when I say that doesn't matter. Because what will keep you on the surface is beating yourself up, giving yourself shit, holding yourself to impossible standards, thinking you've gone back to square one, thinking you fucked things up, wondering what's wrong with you. That will keep you there longer, right? Just noticing that from time to time we get caught in the storm, and that's cool. But how quickly do we return back to the stillness? How quickly do we find our way back home? How quickly do we settle down again? How quickly does the snow globe that's been shaken up, how quickly does that settle? Because that, to me, is not a measurement of success, but it's worth noticing. It used to take me weeks, and it used to take me hours, and sometimes now it takes me minutes, and sometimes the snow globe doesn't even get shaken up anymore, because it's like, okay. And that's really confusing for people around you at first, because they wonder. I know I've mentioned this before, but one of my clients' sons actually said, like, he got cut up in traffic, and the son looked at him weird and was like, why are you not angry? Why did that not annoy you? And he's like, don't know. That's what can happen. Anyway, so to kind of wrap this up, plenty of things to think about, sit with, but just notice, I'm trying to point to that. If you can start to realize there's this very overused logical mind, this egoic self that loves logic and understanding and explaining stuff and right and wrong and this is good and this is bad. It's always judging things, judging people, judging the moment, adding meaning. And when you're in that, life just doesn't feel as full. It doesn't feel as alive. It doesn't feel as exciting, as peaceful, as there's less possibility. It's more volatile. It's up and down. It's, that's where things like anxiety and the real deep anxiety and depression and anger and all of that tends to be there. So even if you can momentarily even start to notice that you are the observer of all of this, the witness to all of this happening, that the space within, the space that all of that arises into, it's like, rather than be the clouds and the thunder and the lightning and the rain, and it's being the sky. It's noticing that you're the sky. And the weather storms, they happen. The weather happens, things happen. But without really affecting the space. The sky doesn't become consumed within the storm. It just is there, and it continues to be there before and after. And sometimes the storm passes and the sun's there, and sometimes it rains, and sometimes it doesn't. And there is no real kind of... It doesn't really matter. That's the truth of it. It stops mattering so much. It's, okay, oh well. It's like, oh, it's raining. That's what mindfulness points to as well, right? And I know I've spoken about this a load. It's just the chattering of the mind is what causes our stress, causes our hell, makes us continually chase the next thing, makes us feel like we're lacking. Even the question, who am I, implies that we don't know, and that question is not coming from the stillness, let me assure you. It's coming from the ego. It's coming from the thought-created self, because the real answer, for me personally, if you say, okay, James, well, if you know so much, what's your answer? Good question that you didn't ask, but you might be asking. Who am I? Well, I probably already answered it. First question, the first answer is, I don't fucking know. It just doesn't seem like an important question anymore. It doesn't seem like I'll ever know. I don't really feel like I need to know. And I don't really care to know. But then what that really points to is the understanding that I am whoever I am in this moment, and that will be different maybe by next year or by 10 years from now, but I am that space. I am the consciousness that things kind of happen within. And it's just this, it's really quite a beautiful experience where it's like, yeah, I tend to show up certain ways. I tend to have certain behaviors or thoughts, and they can change. And if they show up and I notice them and I'm not really a fan, they might change by tomorrow. I may look into, but you can get a sense for the feeling. It's just it's a so much more playful experience, because the final point that I'll leave you with is most people I know, most people I've ever worked with, we're really fucking hard on ourselves. We're really self-critical, beat ourselves up. The voice in our mind can often be very derogatory and self-defeating, and even if you don't know it, it might be worth looking at that. We talk to ourselves like shit, and then we wonder why we talk to other people like shit sometimes. Well, it's because we talk to ourselves like shit. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. That was a long one. I enjoyed that. I hope that landed in some way. I hope that did something. Yeah, that's about it really. Now, if you are open to exploring this further, I've noticed that, for some people the podcast is enough. For some people the podcast is an invitation for them to take this conversation further. So there are options, essentially. One-to-one is rarely available, but it's worth asking the question if that's something you are open to. But the group coaching is essentially these conversations, but because I'm not just talking at you or talking to you, but this is one directional, right? There's something that happens. We can engage a part of you when you're engaged in the conversation, and when you are hearing from other people at various stages of the journey, various levels of awakeness or awareness or consciousness. There's something, again, don't ask me to explain it. I don't know. I'm bored now of trying to logically figure out how the human transformation works. I can explain it in 50 different ways, but there is a certain kind of unknown, miraculous nature to it. So if you want to take this further, then I'll put a link, and maybe I'll add this to the website, because I do group, I call it the Superhuman Mastermind. There's a story behind that. But you can join that. I did a 28-day challenge recently. Now I'm actually thinking of turning it into you can join the calls for 4 weeks, which will make a difference. If you want to stick around, you can. And then I'll talk to you about how that, what that cost, how that looked. Or after 4 weeks, you can say thank you and disappear. It might just give you a bit more of an immersive experience into this conversation, a bit more of an understanding as to how you take these conversations and allow them to create transformation in your life. It's funny even listening to my words there, because allow them to make transformation in your life, because it still implies that you're not really the one that's doing. But anyway, that's probably another conversation for another day. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this. If you haven't shared it with someone you think it would be useful with, do that. If you haven't left me a review and you actually enjoy it, do that. If you want to join the mastermind, find the link and do that. And if not, I will speak to you soon. Have a good one. I'll speak to you next time.